Welcome back, everyone. It is Mike from Mana Hoarders, bringing you our first Pauper Commander deck tech of the channel for a Golgari commander, Kagha Shadow Archdruid. You can cast this commander for 2, a black and a green. You get a 1/4 elf druid that reads, whenever she attacks, she gains death touch until end of turn, and we mill 2 cards. Also, once during each of your turns, you may play a land or cast a permanent spell from among cards in your graveyard that were put there from your library this turn. Now, before we get too far ahead of ourselves, you might be asking the question, what is Pauper Commander? Well, not to worry, it is just like Commander, but with a few key differences. One of the main differences is that your commander can be any uncommon creature, even those that are not legendary. And similar to Pauper, your deck must be made up of entirely common cards with no duplicates, with the exclusion of basic lands. And a couple other main differences are that it is usually accepted that the game starts with each player at 30 life, and commander damage is set at 16 rather than the traditional 21. They say variety is the spice of life, and I've found this to be true since I've started looking into Pauper Commander. I feel like it is a great way for players to switch things up, and also for players who are looking to play the game on a budget, I feel like this is an excellent format. For example, this entire deck comes in at $37.57. This is for all 100 cards, including your commander and all of your lands. Now, I am not saying that cheaper is always better, but if you're able to build more decks that offer you a variety of playstyles, this just means you can enjoy more of the game that we all know and love. Now, I promise the soapbox is going away, and let's dive into this deck, taking a look at our artifacts. First up, we have Charcoal Diamond enters tapped, but it can tap to give us a black mana. Moss Diamond also enters tapped, we can tap it for a green mana. With Golgari Signet, we can pay 1 and tap it to add a black and a green to our mana pool. Commander Sphere taps to give us 1 mana of our commander's color identity. We can also sacrifice it to draw a card. We can tap Mind Stone for a colorless mana. We can also pay 1 and tap it and sacrifice it to draw a card. Wayfarer's Bauble, we can pay 2 and tap it and sacrifice it to search our library for a basic land card, put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle. Ghoul Caller's Bell, we can tap it and each player will mill the top card of their library. And Shard of Broken Glass, the equipped creature gets +1/+0, and whenever it attacks, we can mill the top 2 cards of our library. Moving on to our creatures, we have Liliana's Elite. It gets +1/+1 for each creature card in our graveyard. When Glowspore Shaman enters the battlefield, we can mill 3, then we can put a land card from our graveyard on top of our library. Gixian Skullflayer, at the beginning of our upkeep, if we have 3 or more creature cards in our graveyard, it gets a 1/1 counter. Blanchwood Prowler will enter the battlefield and cause us to mill 3 cards, then we can put a land card from among the milled cards into our hand, and if we don't, it gets a 1/1 counter. Circle of the Land Druid will enter and we will mill 4, then whenever it dies, we're going to return a land card from our graveyard to our hand. Colossal Badger is a nice 6/5, but we included it for the adventure ability. We choose target creature and then mill 4, then put a 1/1 counter on that creature for each creature card milled this way. Shambling Shell, it can sacrifice itself to put a 1/1 counter on target creature, but it also has Dredge 3. If we would draw, instead we can mill 3, and then return this card from our graveyard to our hand. Writhing Necromass is a 5/5 with Death Touch that costs 1 less for each creature in our graveyard. Stinkweed Imp is a 1/2 with Flying and Death Touch that has Dredge 5. Eye Collector is a 1/1 flyer, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, each player mills the top card of their library. Gorging Vulture will ETB and cause us to mill 4, then we gain 1 life for each creature card put into our graveyard this way. Vigor Spore Worm, whenever it ETBs, target creature gains Vigilance and gets +X/+X, where X is the number of creature cards in our graveyard. It also can be blocked by more than 1 creature. Whenever Rhizome Lurcher enters the battlefield, it gets a number of 1/1 counters on it equal to the number of creatures in our graveyard. Mire Triton is a 2/1 Death Toucher. Whenever it ETBs, we mill 2 and then gain 2 life. Wailing Ghoul will enter the battlefield and allow us to mill 2. Carrion Grub will ETB and we will mill 4, and it gets +X/+0, where X is the greatest power among cards in our graveyard. Greater Moss Dog is a 3/3 that has Dredge 3. Tenured Oilcaster has Menace. It gets +3/+0 as long as an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard, and whenever it attacks or blocks, each player mills a card. Obsessive Skinner will ETB and put a 1/1 counter on target creature, and at the beginning of each opponent's upkeep, if there are 4 or more card types among cards in our graveyard, we put a 1/1 counter on target creature. Excavated Wall is a 0/4 defender. We can pay 1 and tap it to mill a card. Skola Grove Dancer, whenever a land card is put into our graveyard from anywhere, we gain a life. We can also pay 2 and a green and mill the top card of our library. Mind Rack Harpy, at the beginning of combat on our turn, each player mills 3. Golgari Brown Scale, whenever it is put into our hand from our graveyard, we gain 2 life, and it has Dredge 2. And Moldgraph Millipede, whenever it enters we mill 3, then it gets a 1/1 counter for each creature card in our graveyard. Now let's take a look at some enchantments. Overgrowth, we enchant a land, and whenever that enchanted land is tapped for mana, we add an additional 2 green. Necromantic Thirst, we enchant a creature, and whenever that creature deals combat damage to a player, we can return target creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Strange Augmentation, the enchanted creature gets +1/+1, but as long as there are 4 more card types among cards in our graveyard, it gets +2/+2. We can pay 3 and a black to sacrifice Font of Return to return up to 3 creature cards from our graveyard to our hand. Talons of Wildwood gives the enchanted creature +1/+1 and trample. We can also pay 2 and a green to return it from our graveyard to our hand. Moldervine Cloak gives the enchanted creature +3/+3 and it has Dredge 2. Rancor will give the enchanted creature +2/+0 and trample, and whenever it is put into our graveyard from the battlefield, we can return it to our hand. Sleeper's Guile gives the enchanted creature Fear, and whenever it is put into our graveyard from the battlefield, we can return it to our hand. Tortured Existence, we can pay a black and discard a creature card to return target creature from our graveyard to our hand. Vessel of Nascency, we can sacrifice it to reveal the top 4 cards of our library. We can put an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker from among them into our hand and the rest into our graveyard. And Crawling Infestation, at our upkeep we will mill 2, and whenever 1 or more creatures are put into our graveyard from anywhere during our turn, we get a 1/1 green insect, but this ability only triggers once each turn. Let's take a look at our instance. Grapple with the Past, we mill 3, then return a creature or land from our graveyard to our hand. Overwhelming Remorse costs 1 less for each creature in our graveyard. We can exile target creature or planeswalker. Wasteful Harvest, we mill 5, then we can return a permanent from among them to our hand. Corpse Churn, we mill 3, then return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Ghastly Demise, we destroy target non-black creature if its toughness is less than or equal to the number of cards in our graveyard. Ghoul's Feast, target creature gets +X/+0, where X is the number of creatures in our graveyard. Deal Gone Bad, target creature gets -3/-3, and target player mills 3. Gnaw to the Bone, we gain 2 life for each creature card in our graveyard. Soul Shriek, target creature gets +X/+0, where X is the number of creature cards in our graveyard, and then we sacrifice it at the end of the turn. Unseal the Necropolis, each player will mill 3, then we can return up to 2 target creature cards from our graveyard to our hand. Dig Up the Body has Casualty 1, meaning we can potentially copy it. We will mill 2, then return a creature card from our graveyard to our hand. Songs of the Damned, we add a black mana to our mana pool for each creature in our graveyard. And Repopulate, we can shuffle all creature cards from target player's graveyard into that player's library. Moving on to our sorceries, we have Atrocious Experiment, target player mills 2, draws 2, and loses 2 life. Summon Undead, we mill 3, then return target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield. Druidic Ritual, we mill 3, then return up to 1 target creature and up to 1 target land from our graveyard to our hand. Rampant Growth, we search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. Drown in Filth, we choose a creature, mill 4, then that creature gets -1/-1 until end of turn for each land card in our graveyard. Forever Young, we can put any number of target creature cards from our graveyard on top of our library, and then we draw. Funeral Rites, we draw 2, lose 2, and then mill 2. And Far Wanderings gets us a basic land from our library onto the battlefield tapped, but it has Threshold, so if 7 or more cards in our graveyard, instead we get up to 3 basic lands, put them onto the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. And last but not least is our mana base. We are going to be keeping things very basic with 18 basic swamps and 17 basic forests. And just like that, we have reached the end of this Pauper Commander deck tech for Kagha Shadow Archdruid. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button, subscribe, tell your friends about us, and let me know in the comments what commander you would like to see me build around next. Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one!